It's 7 a.m. Your alarm clock rings. You wake up to hurry and get to work on time. In a rush, you throw on some clothes that some might label smart casual as you gulp down your coffee and grab your bag on the way out. Once arrived at the office, you will sit in front of your screen for 8 hours, format rectangles in a PowerPoint, or draft some rollout strategy for a product you secretly think is completely unnecessary when it finally hits you. What am I actually doing? At least that's how I felt after working in the corporate world for 2 years. So, faced with this issue, naturally, the first thing I did was open up Google and type what I was feeling into the search bar. And after endless scrolling through a mind-numbing amount of articles, subreddits and Quora threads, in which all kinds of people talked about experiencing this, I kept hearing about this one book. So, one fateful afternoon, after making a particularly mind-numbing PowerPoint, I set out to my favourite bookshop to get my hands on a copy of Bullshit Jobs by David Graeber. But let's backtrack a little. I want to tell you my story from the beginning. The thing is, I didn't always think my job was bullshit. In fact, when I first entered the corporate world, I felt amazing. I was finally an adult with this cool grown-up job. But the feeling that I wasn't doing anything meaningful or useful to society in any way kept creeping up on me. I actually seemed to be participating in greenwashing efforts, which seemed sort of contradictory as my job title was Sustainable Finance Consultant at the time. This was what brought me to that life-changing moment at the bookstore when I first laid my hands on David Graeber's book. So I started reading on the phenomenon of bullshit jobs. In the year 1930, John Maynard Keynes predicted that by century's end, technology would have advanced sufficiently that countries like Great Britain or the United States would have achieved a 15-hour work week. There's every reason to believe he was right. In technological terms, we are quite capable of this, and yet it didn't happen. Instead, technology has been marshalled, if anything, to figure out ways to make us all work more. In order to achieve this, jobs have had to be created that are, effectively, pointless. Huge swaths of people, in Europe and North America in particular, spent their entire working lives performing tasks they secretly believe do not really need to be performed. The moral and spiritual damage that comes from this situation is profound. It is a scar across our collective soul, yet virtually no one talks about it. And the longer I worked on presentations and spreadsheets that I thought didn't really bring any societal value, the deeper that scar across my soul became. And apparently not just mine. The first time David Graeber published these words was actually not in his book. The first time he published them was actually in his article that Graeber wrote for Strike magazine in August of 2013. The article went absolutely viral. Someone even rented out ad space on the London Tube and plastered it with quotes from Graeber's article. And we can even see on Google Trends that in August 2013, the search for bullshit jobs shot up. But not just that, the article was translated into 15 different languages and republished by many newspapers because it resonated with so many people. David Graeber recounts that many people wrote to him after the article came out, with some even quitting their jobs because of his article, and some just writing to him confessing that their job was completely useless. Wow, nail on the head. I'm a corporate lawyer, tax litigator to be specific. I contribute nothing to this world, and am utterly miserable all of the time. But the article didn't change anything about the rise of meaningless jobs. Quite the contrary, actually. So I assume there's still a lot of people who feel like their jobs are meaningless and are miserable because of it. You might be one of them, if you clicked on this video. And I know the feeling. I was pretty miserable as well. But quitting is difficult, with most of us having to pay rent and having to put food on the table. Most of us are bound to go back to our jobs every day, sit in front of a screen, and attend meetings that we think are bullshit. Obviously, not all jobs are bullshit. Yours might not be bullshit. This is David Graeber's definition of a bullshit job. A bullshit job is a form of paid employment that is so completely pointless, unnecessary, or pernicious that even the employee cannot justify its existence, even though, as part of the conditions of employment, the employee feels obliged to pretend that this is not the case. The subjective element is a big part of it. So, if you feel like your job is meaningful, then it probably is. Of course, it is also possible that only some parts of your job are meaningful, but that a lot of tasks you have to do are bullshit. For example, if you're a teacher or a university lecturer, you might feel like teaching students is a very meaningful way to spend your time, but the administrative overhead you have to do could easily be automated away or is simply unnecessary. So let me know in the comments if you think you have a bullshit job after watching this video. I would love for the comment section to become a place where we can cathartically discuss the meaning of our work. But now, back to David Graeber's article, where he ponders which jobs are meaningful and which ones aren't. Over the course of the last century, the number of workers employed as domestic servants in industry and in the farm sector has collapsed dramatically. At the same time, professional, managerial, clerical, sales and service workers tripled, growing from 1/4 to 3/4 of total employment. In other words, productive jobs have, just as predicted, been largely automated away. But rather than allowing a massive reduction of working hours to free the world's population to pursue their own projects, pleasures, vision and ideas, we have seen the ballooning of not even so much of the service sector as of the administrative sector, up to and including the creation of whole new industries like financial services or telemarketing, or the unprecedented expansion of sectors like corporate law, academic and health administration, human resources, and public relations. And these numbers do not even reflect on all those people whose job is to provide administrative, technical, or security support for these industries, or for that matter, the whole host of ancillary industries, dog washers, all-night pizza delivery, that only exist because everyone else is spending so much of their time working in all the other ones. These are what I propose to call bullshit jobs. But the tragedy doesn't solely lie there. Graeber goes on to write, in our society there seems to be a general rule that the more obviously one's work benefits other people, the less one is likely to be paid for it. Again, an objective measure is hard to find, but one easy way to get a sense is to ask, what would happen were this entire class of people to simply disappear? Say what you like about nurses, garbage collectors or mechanics, it's obvious that were they to vanish in a puff of smoke, the results would be immediate and catastrophic. A world without teachers or dock workers would soon be in trouble, and even one without science fiction writers or ska musicians would clearly be a lesser place. It's not entirely clear how humanity would suffer were all private equity CEOs, lobbyists, PR researchers, actuaries, telemarketers, bailiffs, or legal consultants to similarly vanish. Many suspect it might improve markedly. Yet, apart from a handful of well-touted exceptions, doctors, the rule holds surprisingly well. In 1968, New Yorkers actually did find out what would happen if garbage collectors didn't show up to work. This historical event seems quite amusing looking back, but must have been awful to live through. The city sanitation workers had gone on strike, demanding a 5% wage increase and better pensions. What started as mildly annoying evolved into a citywide health emergency within 10 days. Trash was piling up chest high, and rats were feasting on it. So we can definitely conclude garbage collector is not a bullshit job. Anyway, the huge public response to David Graeber's article back in 2013 led to more empirical research, like a YouGov poll that surveyed the British public whether they thought their job was contributing to society and was somehow meaningful. It came to the conclusion that 37% of British workers think their jobs are pointless. Now, the sample size wasn't huge in this one, but they were also recreated in other surveys around the world, like for example in the Netherlands, where a poll showed that 40% of respondents thought their job was pointless. And for many people who were going into work every day to pretend to do work that they thought was meaningless, it became cathartic to talk about this. This motivated David Graeber to write this book, to explore how it came to this massive increase in paper pusher work and explore what the psychological and societal implications for this are. On efficiency. Advocates of today's corporate capitalism, which is actually quite different from the capitalism Adam Smith was referring to, keep claiming that it is the most efficient mode of production. But if that is so, how come that so many people describe their jobs as pointless? Especially salaried office workers, who spend a lot of their working time updating their Facebook profiles. Mainly boomers, other generations nowadays do that on X, Instagram, or scroll on TikTok. Or they spend their time playing Xbox or watching YouTube videos while working from home. Please comment down below if you're actually watching this video while working from home right now. And honestly, congrats on withdrawing from the bullshit and doing something that actually is fun to you. Please watch more of my videos while working from home. Anyways, all this email writing, PowerPoint making, and stakeholder aligning is probably far from what I or probably anyone else might call efficient. If anything has been made more efficient in today's corporate capitalism, it's the work of hourly paid blue-collar workers. Cleaners, Amazon employees, or people delivering parcels are usually subcontractors. And this is how a DHL worker on Reddit describes his working situation. We all know how terrible the working environment is in DHL. I have worked in their warehouse and parcel delivery. This is what was happening in warehouse. You stand in front of the conveyor and are waiting for parcels. You have to load the whole truck, but that's not the problem. The problem is that you have to load 3 trucks simultaneously, while supervisors are yelling at you, screaming, whistling, acting crazy, and look at you like you are a slave. So there's someone having to load 3 trucks simultaneously while being yelled at, while everyone employed at the Amazon or DHL offices is probably comfortably sipping on a cup of coffee while lazily putting together a PowerPoint on change management or corporate strategy that no one will really pay attention to. Or they might be drafting the internal company newsletter that definitely no one will read. Imagine if we could sum up all the hours that were spent drafting unnecessary PowerPoints. If we used that time for actual useful stuff, like maybe think about how to solve the climate crisis or end homelessness, we could probably achieve that in a month. Instead, this time allocated to the internal company newsletter merely leads to more clutter in your work email inbox and will only elicit the mild annoyance which comes from pressing delete email. Okay, but enough ranting. Back to David Graeber's more structured approach, because he delivers a couple of valuable explanations of why this might be and also what types of bullshit jobs there are. The 5 categories of bullshit jobs. First category, feudal retainer type jobs / flunkies. This category of bullshit jobs actually has a simple explanation that dates back to the times of kings and queens. In order to seem super important, kings and others who were high up the feudal ladder would surround themselves with servants and all kinds of minions and underlings. As Graeber puts it, you cannot be magnificent without an entourage. Mechanisms like this certainly still hold true in today's corporate world, with, for example, consultants most of the time being employed to make a C-suite executive seem more impressive or validate whatever he's saying. There are also countless other examples, from receptionists, assistants, or interns who are solely employed to make their immediate superiors look and feel important. Graeber calls this managerial feudalism. People like doormen also fall into the category of feudal retainer jobs. The existence of doormen can, in an age of electronic intercoms, only be explained by the need of their employer to validate him or herself as the ruling class. When Graeber was writing his book, he opened up an email account where people who thought their job was bullshit could write in. He received over 250 intricate testimonies of people who thought their job was pointless and who in great detail described why that was. This is an excerpt of someone who worked as a doorman. Another bullshit job, concierge in one of these buildings. Half my time was spent pressing a button to open the front door for residents and saying hello as they passed through the lobby. If I didn't get to that button in time and a resident had to open the door manually, I'd hear about it from my manager. Feudal retainer jobs are relatively harmless to society. Of course, with exception of the deep feelings of emptiness scarring the souls of the ones having to pretend that their job is somehow meaningful. There's another category of bullshit jobs that is a lot more harmful to society and also has some sort of aggressive and deceptive element to it. Graeber calls this category the Goons. Jobs like marketing managers, PR specialists, corporate lawyers, and lobbyists fall into this category. Here's an example. Tom. I work for a very large American-owned post-production company based in London. There are parts of my job that have always been very enjoyable and fulfilling. I get to make cars fly, buildings explode, and dinosaurs attack alien spaceships for movie studios, providing entertainment for audiences worldwide. More recently, however, a growing percentage of our customers are advertising agencies. They bring us adverts for well-known branded products, shampoos, toothpaste, moisturizing creams, washing powders, etc. And we use visual effects trickery to make it seem like these products actually work. We also work on TV shows and music videos. We reduce bags under the eyes of women, make hair shinier, teeth whiter, make pop stars and film stars look thinner, etc. We airbrush skin to remove spots, isolate the teeth and colour correct them to make them whiter. Also done on the clothes in washing powder ads. Paint out split ends and add shiny highlights to hair and shampoo commercials. And there are special deforming tools to make people thinner. These techniques are literally used in every commercial on TV, plus most TV drama shows, and lots of movies, particularly on female actors, but also on men. We essentially make viewers feel inadequate while they're watching the main programs and then exaggerate the effectiveness of the solutions provided in the commercial breaks. I get paid £100,000 a year to do this. I'll get more into the societal cost of these jobs in a minute, but such jobs are not only harmful to society, but also to the mental health of the people having to do these clearly harmful things in order to pay their rent and buy food. Discontent and disillusionment in jobs like advertising, marketing and publicity are so high that some of these marketing professionals have grouped together and founded Adbusters, a magazine produced entirely by the ones who resent what they're being made to do for a living that tries to advertise against consumer culture. I'll link their website down below. They have been behind movements like Occupy Wall Street and many more. Lobbyists also count into the Goons category. These people are employed by big oil, tobacco or other companies trying to shape regulation in favour of their shareholders. Regulations that usually serve public health purposes or protect the environment. Sadly, Graeber didn't receive a single submission from a lobbyist. Maybe it's only possible to work in such a profession by completely lying to yourself about the nature of your job. Also, if you are a lobbyist and need to pay rent and buy food for yourself and your children, we don't judge here. Maybe just write down in the comments and maybe we can help you find another job. But on to the next category. The duct tapers. This is a job that could easily be automated away, but instead of doing so, someone is employed to do it. You might ask why companies would employ people for stuff that could be automated. It makes no sense efficiency-wise. But don't worry, I'll get into the big why in a minute. The next category is the box tickers. Box tickers are described as employees who exist only or primarily to allow an organisation to be able to claim it is doing something that in fact it is not doing. They are usually around stuff like corporate responsibility programs by banks. Banks are clearly not socially responsible. Yet they have HR and publicity departments who organise one charity day a year in which the bank employees hand out cheap sandwiches to homeless people to then be able to make LinkedIn posts about what a great socially aware bank they are, so that young, naive or other gullible people will think that this bank is really committed to help the world and that this would be a great employer. Also, an important aspect of box ticking is churning out reports that look physically attractive. Some executives employ people specifically to make their reports and presentations look important. As Graeber writes, many of these reports are nothing more than props in a kabuki-like corporate theatre. No one actually reads them all the way through. But this doesn't stop ambitious executives from cheerfully shelling out half a workman's yearly wages of company money just to be able to say, "Oh, yes, we commissioned a report on that." Now, let's move on to the last category. The taskmasters. These are usually managers who either assign meaningless work to others, or if they do assign meaningful work to others and themselves not do anything apart from that, that would still sort of be a bullshit job. Here's another testimony. I have a bullshit job, and it happens to be in middle management. 10 people work for me, but from what I can tell, they can all do the work without my oversight. My only function is to hand them work, which I suppose the people that actually generate the work could do themselves. I will say that in a lot of cases, the work that is assigned is a product of other managers with bullshit jobs, which makes my job 2 levels of bullshit. I just got promoted to this job, and I spend a lot of my time looking around and wondering what I'm supposed to be doing. As best I can tell, I'm supposed to be motivating the workers. I sort of doubt that I'm earning my salary doing that, even if I'm really trying. On complex, multiform bullshit jobs. Graeber readily admits that this is a non-exhaustive list and jobs can also be a complex multi-form of bullshit. I would say my consulting job was a combination of feudal retainer job, as it definitely existed to make someone else seem important. I was also a goon, because I definitely harmed society. And I was also definitely box ticking, as I churned out an insane amount of PowerPoints that just existed to prove that something was done, even though nothing meaningful was actually ever achieved. I would love to hear how you would categorize your job, so write it down in the comments. On top of all of these bullshit jobs that I just laid out, there's also second-order bullshit jobs. These are not in itself bullshit jobs, but only exist because other bullshit jobs exist. For example, lobbying is most definitely a bullshit job, but the cleaners having to clean the lobbyists' offices could be classified as second-order bullshit jobs, because if lobbying didn't exist, these cleaners would also not have to clean their offices. Or dog groomers, who have to groom marketing managers' dogs because the marketing managers are too busy creating adverts targeting women in their mid-30s who have been led to believe that what they really need right now is a Stanley Cup. Or the personal assistant of C-suite executives who are usually so busy bullshitting investors that they don't have time to pick up their own dry cleaning and need an assistant for that. But what all of them have in common is that once the worker becomes aware that their job is meaningless and doesn't contribute anything to society, it will definitely have an impact on their mental health. Over centuries, philosophers, psychologists, and economists studied human motivation. They believed in an inherent motivation to conquest and dominate the world around them to secure access to food, shelter, and reproductive success. And as Nietzsche put it, the will to power, which refers to some innate desire to achieve greatness, which I think is quite an antiquated philosophy that only finance bros or other people who have fallen prey to some form of toxic mindset might subscribe to. But anyways, in the last 100 years, a new stream of research has emerged. One that has, unlike the works of Freud, Nietzsche, or other earlier researchers who tried to explain human motivation, actually been underlined by systematic evidence. If you're a parent, you might have observed what German psychologist Karl Gross first discovered in 1901, and that has since been meticulously studied in developmental psychology. It is an effect so powerful that it explains everything that humans have ever built. Karl Gross called it the pleasure at being the cause. Modern developmental psychologists call it the development of a sense of agency, and there's a famous experiment used to study this effect, the mobily conjugate reinforcement paradigm. Now, I know that's not the catchiest name, so let me explain. We have a baby, a mobile, and a ribbon. One end of the ribbon is tied around the baby's ankle, and the other end is connected to the mobile hanging over his or her crib. When the baby kicks, the mobile moves. By repeatedly doing this, the baby learns the relationship of kicking and the movement of the mobile. The baby is usually overjoyed with this discovery. Discovering and experiencing the delight of being able to cause a certain effect leads to laughter, squeaking, and expressions of joy on the baby's face. However, when the ribbon gets detached from the mobile so that the kicking doesn't have an impact on the mobile anymore, what will happen is this. At first, the baby frantically kicks more, and realising that no amount of kicking will move the mobile, these dramatic effects kick in. At first, crying, anger and rage, which then leads to the refusal to engage, and then a kind of catatonic folding into oneself and withdrawing from the world entirely. Psychiatrist and psychoanalyst Francis Bruchek called this the trauma of failed influence, and suspected that such traumatic experiences might lie behind many mental health issues later in life. If this translates to what adults trapped in useless jobs feel, This could help explain the sharp increase in depression, burnout, and all kinds of devastating mental health issues that we have seen rise in the last decade. As Graeber put it in his book, it's not just an assault on the person's sense of self-importance, but also a direct attack on the very foundations of the sense that one even is a self. A human being unable to have meaningful impact on the world ceases to exist. I, for myself, know that I was deeply unhappy in my corporate, meaningless job. And the worst part was that I couldn't tell anyone I was working with how I was feeling, because that would have meant admitting that I thought it was all a scam. A big part of the finance industry are banks. What they do is create money by giving out loans, and then they move around the money in weird and complex ways, extracting another small cut with every transaction. Let me know if you want a more detailed video about this. Of course, there are different types of banks, but a surprising number of bank employees can't even figure out what the real justification for their particular species of bank is supposed to be. Here's another testimony from David Graeber's book. I work as a fund accountant at a custodian bank. I've never really figured out what custodian banks do. I understand the concept associated with custodian banks, but I always thought of them as just an unnecessary added layer of accounting. Custodian banks safeguard concepts such as stocks and bonds. How do they actually do that? Can Russian hackers steal these concepts? As far as I can see, the entire custodian bank industry is bullshit. In finance, everyone is under this enormous pressure not to ask too many questions. Firstly, it might make you seem stupid, but more importantly, questioning the validity of the system you're working in is about equally as suicidal as coming out as gay in the 1950s. As one banker in David Graeber's book described it, there are many people who have read on the phenomenon of bullshit jobs, the essay, and know of the reality of our industry, yet they, including myself, are consumed by fear of losing our jobs, so we don't talk about or discuss these issues openly. We lie to ourselves, our colleagues, and our families. Having to endure this would just be shattering to anyone's mental health or sense of self. The societal damage of bullshit jobs. Bullshit jobs not only have a destructive effect on our soul, but they're quite damaging to society as a whole. Of course, it is hard to measure the societal value of different jobs, but it cannot be denied that in our current economic system there exists an inverse relationship between the social value of our work and the amount of money one is likely to be paid for it. Picture this. A marketing manager who in his day-to-day job fulfills tasks like making models thinner in Photoshop, making their hair glossier and their skin blemish-free. He will probably be making about 80k a year if he lives in Europe. If he lives in the US, it will probably be more like 120k a year. In contrast, a cleaning lady who works in a hospital earns around 25k in Germany or 30k in the US. Now, let's take a look at the impact both of these jobs have on our society. The marketing manager's effect on society is at best fueling consumerism. At worst, the photoshopping of models to make them look skinnier, blemish-free and with luscious hair will have an impact on some teenage girls who now feel ugly and morbidly obese, and they might end up going on some sort of crazy diet. I speak from experience, as when I was a teenager, me and my girlfriends went on the 1 carrot a day diet to finally look like the models in all of the magazines we were reading. Eating disorder statistics have been on the rise. 1 in 5 women experience an eating disorder, with the disorder starting earlier than the age of 25 in 95% of these cases. Once a teenage girl has been convinced by the works of the marketing managers that she is somehow inadequate, she might start buying diet pills from the money she earns at the bakery after school. Diet pills that probably don't work, but which are coincidentally brought into her awareness by some mechanism also involving marketing managers. And this is still the good scenario. In the bad scenario, her eating disorder gets so out of hand that she has to go into a mental health clinic. So much for the societal impact a marketing manager might have. As for the cleaning lady, with every wipe of her sponge, she eradicates germs or some kind of bacteria. Bacteria that could quickly evolve into the next global pandemic if left unattended. I think it is safe to say that the cleaning lady brings a lot more value to society than the marketing manager. Yet the salary both earn doesn't reflect this at all. We can also definitely come to the same conclusion when contrasting hedge fund managers, lobbyists, investment bankers, or consultants, who all contribute nothing to society at best, but are usually harmful to society, and who all earn way above average salaries. Contrast their salaries with, let's say, school teachers, garbage collectors, bus drivers, grocery store workers, baristas, or nurses, who all earn below average salaries while being indispensable to our society and economy. If you remember the great garbage strike I was talking about earlier, it prompted a national health emergency within 10 days. Financial services workers usually don't go on strike. I mean, why would they? They already have a cushy office job, so there's not much to strike for. But the one time where bankers did go on strike, in 1970 in Ireland, the strike lasted for half a year and didn't have any effect on the economy whatsoever. It is, however, hard to put a number to the usefulness of a job or assessing the cost to society of a job. But some researchers set out to do just that. And while admitting it is not possible to compare all professions, for example, the value in the creative industries is just too hard to measure, a rough approximation was possible for other professions. The researchers looked at how much value a worker, they actually took real-life people with detailed descriptions in the report they published, would create for every £1 they earned. Here's the breakdown. So a banker's cost to society for every pound earned is -£7. An advertising executive is -11.5. A tax accountant's cost to society is £47 for every £1 he earns. This is what these professions cost society. In contrast, the hospital cleaner puts society forward by £10 for every £1 he or she earns. Now, these are of course all real-world examples from a New Economics Foundation report that was released in 2009. So obviously the numbers aren't too accurate anymore. Plus, they're not statistically significant in any way. But in 2017, US researchers used a more statistically sound approach to assess the value of different jobs. These were the results. Their conclusion was that the most socially valuable workers whose contributions could be calculated are medical researchers, who add $9 of overall value to society for every $1 they are paid. I've spoken a lot about the finance sector so far because that is where I'm coming from. But Graeber actually attributes a great deal of the bullshitification of our economy to the finance sector. And I couldn't agree more. The rise of financial services and its gaining of influence in our economy is actually called financialization. It's a relatively new term that refers to the process of financial markets gaining unprecedented influence over our entire economy. It's the process that has enabled the emergence of wild levels of abstraction with an ever-growing derivatives market and complex financial products, so that so-called finance bros can feel smart about trading absolute scams. As Graeber put it in his book, it just seemed to make sense that just as Wall Street profits were derived less and less from firms involved in commerce or manufacturing, and more from debt, speculation, and the creation of complex financial instruments, so did an ever-increasing proportion of workers come to make their living from manipulating similar abstractions. These days, it's hard to recall the almost mystical aura with which the financial sector has surrounded itself in the years leading up to 2008. Financiers had managed to convince the public, and not just the public, but social theorists too, that with instruments such as collateralized debt obligations and high-speed trading algorithms so complex they could only be understood by astrophysicists, they had, like modern alchemists, learned ways to whisk value out of nothing by means that others dared not even try to understand. Then, of course, came the crash, and it turned out that most of the instruments were scams. Many weren't even particularly sophisticated scams. In a way, one could argue that the whole financial sector is a scam of sorts, since it represents itself as largely about directing investments toward profitable opportunities in commerce and industry, when, in fact, it does very little of that. The overwhelming bulk of its profits comes from colluding with governments to create and then to trade and manipulate various forms of debt. Financialization has led to a weird set of phenomena. For example, that millions of people think that value means buying NFTs, crypto, stocks, or any other asset class, or even worse, building whole companies around trading those. I mean, if you really think about it, is it really useful to society that millions of people spend their entire lives glued to a screen trading intangible assets? What value does that actually produce for society? Research has shown that financialization has increased inequality, slowed down investment in real production, mounted pressures on indebted households and individuals, and led to a decline in democratic accountability. But I'm realising I'm getting carried away here, and I'll be making an entire video about the rise of financial markets, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss that one. Also, if you're enjoying it so far, it would mean the world if you gave this video a thumbs up, because that helps push the video to other people, and I feel like we should be talking more about the bullshitification of our economy. Anyway, I still haven't talked about the most important question of all of them, the why. In a time where job seekers need an impressive looking resume to find a job that will let them provide for their family, having a previous pompous job title of the likes of Chief Compliance and Risk Officer or Director of Brand Strategy and Execution on your resume is probably beneficial. What is also beneficial is having led a team of 30 people on your CV. It's certainly more likely to get you a well-paying job than if you only led a team of 2 people. So, why would any compliance and risk officer in their right mind admit that they don't need 30 people to churn out a vast amount of buzzword-filled PowerPoints to illustrate the newest ESG compliance risks? Also, if you're interested in ESG regulations and how much of a scam they are, my last video was about that, so go check that out if you're interested. Anyways, if our Chief Compliance and Risk Officer ever does go on, let's say, a date, wouldn't said date be a lot more impressed by an entourage of 30 underlings? So, under no circumstances ever would our Chief Compliance and Risk Officer admit that the vast majority of people under him are actually not really needed. As for the political mechanisms behind the why, I want to take a quick look at the political significance of the infamous unemployment rate. Politicians love to say that the unemployment rate dropped while on their term, or will definitely mention it when campaigning.
That brand new jobs report proves decisively that Kamala Harris and Crooked Joe have driven our economy off a cliff. Nationwide, the economy created, this is the lowest number in years, a pitiful 12,000 jobs last month. Whoa. Hundreds of thousands of jobs less than what it should be. I never heard of 12,000 jobs. That's not even believable.
And every month, in fact, that Vice President Harris and I have been in office, we've created jobs every single month. The nation has now created 16 million jobs since I've come to office, more jobs created in a single presidential term than any time in American history.
But no one ever talks about the usefulness of these jobs. But what can we do about all of this? And should you quit your job right now? The answer is no, or at least not right away. Because that's what I did a year ago, and let me tell you, the past year has been anything but easy. Living in a world in which you need money to pay your rent, buy food, pay for health insurance, quitting your job impulsively is definitely not the smartest thing you could be doing. When I quit my consulting job last year, I had no idea how stressful it would be to start my own jewellery company and be self-employed. Also, it's linked down below if you do want to get some cool jewellery pieces and support me. These videos take forever to make, so literally every bit of support means the world. But even though being self-employed is super stressful, I'm still so happy that I went down this path, which I'm really enjoying right now, even though there's obviously been a lot of struggles. And I couldn't have gone through it without the help of my wonderful family, my friends who I love so much and who support me every time I call them crying and have a meltdown because of taxes or something. Especially my brother, he's taking on a big chunk of the comforting when I'm crying. Also, he was the one to recommend David Graeber's article to me all those years back. So thanks for that. I just wouldn't be able to survive in this life without him. So huge shout out to my brother. And yeah, and it's definitely also a lot easier to quit your job and start your own thing if you don't have kids or a partner that you'd have to take care of. I only have to feed myself. But yeah, quitting and starting your own thing is definitely not the only option to fight the proliferation of bullshit jobs. I think the most important thing we need to do is to start talking about it. Like Keynes had predicted in the 1930s, automation did lead to mass unemployment, and so will AI. Yes, AI will take our jobs, and that is actually not bad news at all. That is, if we as a society embrace technology's progress and its potential of reducing working hours. For that to happen though, we need to stop filling the gap with dummy jobs that are effectively made up and are definitely not needed for society to function. This would also in turn lead to less ads, less internal company newsletters, and less scammy financial products like crypto, pump and dump schemes, NFTs, or ESG ETFs that are not sustainable at all. Anyways, how do we do this? Here's a 3-step plan. First, start questioning and talk to your colleagues about the phenomenon of bullshit jobs. Ideally, share the link of this video because that would also make me very happy. Or buy David Graeber's book and start quoting it in conversations with your colleagues and boss. Secondly, if you do manage people at work, before assigning a task, ask yourself, do these things really need to be done, or am I just coming up with them right now to fill this person's 40-hour work week? Third, let's start talking about the societal cost of bullshit jobs. That means the mental health issues that office workers in bullshit jobs face, the unfair distribution of wages that has led to this inverse relationship of societal value and monetary compensation, which is essentially exploiting blue-collar workers and workers of the caring class like teachers and nurses. Also, I would absolutely love to hear about your thoughts in the comments. Reading and replying to your comments is one of my absolute favourite things about making videos on YouTube. So please let me know what you think and about your experiences in bullshit jobs. Have you had one? What type of bullshit job was it? And so on. And if you really like this video, I just started a Patreon, which is linked down below, because the production of this type of video takes forever because there's so much research going into it, and all of it just takes an insane amount of time. If you've been following me on Instagram, you know how long this video has been in the works. And if you don't yet follow me on Instagram and want to see more behind the scenes content of a corporate dropout, here's my username. And also because these videos take so long to produce and I want to upload more regularly, I've decided to start a second channel where I'll be doing more relaxed, less research intensive videos, and it's also linked down below if you want to subscribe to it. I'll hopefully be uploading there once a week, and the videos are going to be a lot shorter, and I'm just going to be sort of a vloggy kind of type thing about stuff I like what it's like to build your own small company, my workout routine, or videos about my adventures, because I'm moving to Berlin, which I'm super excited about. So follow me on there if you want to see more about that. Anyways, so much self-promo. I hope you have a lovely day, and bye!